everyone, and welcome to the Legacy Society's important lecture by Dean Penelope Andrews. I'm Diana Yuck, and I'm chair of the UCT Alumni Advisory Board. I'm also a member of council and an adjunct professor in the law faculty. So I'm particularly interested in hearing what Penny has to say today on such an important topic. Please could you turn off your cell phones, unless you've got a fantastic ring that will encourage us to dance or do something. I wanted to just relate to you that when I was here last, we had the convocation AGM. And I'm just delighted to see that everybody is back. But on this occasion, I think we're all going to be very engaged and interested in listening to each other, and particularly Penny, on the important topic of transformation and decolonisation in law. A little plug for the Legacy Society. I think this has been distributed to everyone as you walked in, but I wanted to read the words of Nelson Mandela, that what counts in life is not the mere fact that we have lived, it is what difference we have made to the lives of others that will determine the significance of the life we lead. And I think that continues to inspire the work of the Legacy Committee, and also is what underpins the Distinguishing UCT campaign, which is very much about growing talent, realizing excellence, and advancing transformation. So it gives me very great pleasure. First of all, thank you for coming out on such a beautiful evening. We actually thought that most people would be picnicking in the park. But thank you for joining us. As we all know, the topic of transformation and decolonisation has been hotly debated over many months at UCT and other universities. Honest, authentic debate about this issue has unified some and alienated others. It's helped us to gain friends and make enemies. Indeed, some personal relationships and professional relationships have probably come to an end over debates and disagreements about decolonisation and transformation. But I think that the fact we're all gathered here this evening demonstrates how many of us are interested and willing to engage in areas where we're likely to hold very different opinions and different experiences. But the important issue for me is that we're not avoiding conflict or dealing with difficult and often uncomfortable conversations, but bravely engaging and sometimes agreeing to disagree. I'm delighted that Dean Penny Andrews has joined us this evening to discuss this important topic. She has demonstrated her bravery, authenticity, and willingness to tackle difficult issues over many years in her professional life in Australia, USA, and thankfully now back at UCT. In my view, Penny exemplifies all the attributes we want to see in our law students, but also students generally, demonstrating their humanity, their honesty, and their authenticity in dealings with each other. So I'm delighted to hand over to Penny and ask her to come and address us. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I'm so glad that you're going to spend Saturday evening or part of your Saturday evening with me to talk about this really very important subject This is a subject that we've been grappling with at UCT in the last 2 years. I became the dean at UCT Law a year ago. So I've been immersed in much of the discussion around transformation and decolonization. What I'm going to do in the lecture is basically just touch on a few pointers, because this is such a large subject matter and there's so many areas that we could cover that I've decided just to focus on UCT law and some of the issues, the way we've addressed these issues, and then maybe towards the end raise some questions and think about what a transformed law faculty will look like and what the obstacles are really to transformation and decolonization. I'm not going to be able to move much because I have these two things that I need to keep close to, so I'll just stand here. So let me just tell you what I'm going to do, what the roadmap is for tonight's lecture, just in case I cannot get to all the topics and all the issues. So the first is that I'm going to just look briefly at where we've come to in higher education, 20 years after the formal end of apartheid, 21 years after the formal end of apartheid. And then I'd like to look at definitions, because we talk about transformation and decolonization, but I think it means different things for different people. And we also talk about transformation and decolonization as if we just started talking about it yesterday, when in actual fact, the subject has been part of political discourse since the end of decolonization, and I would argue probably since the end of slavery. Once, if you look at indigenous communities in Australia, for example, in New Zealand and so on, these questions loom large for maybe over a century. The third thing I want to look at is what are the drivers of change? In addition to this issue of transformation and decolonization, what are the drivers of change in higher education, and particularly law faculties? And then, as I said, I'd look at the obstacles to transformation, and then what a transformed law faculty would look like. Now, the London Review of Books did a summary, a review essay about a week ago on Frantz Fanon. They looked at his life and his struggle and his commitment to the Algerian struggle for liberation. It was an interesting summary. A few of us met yesterday to talk about it because Frantz Fanon has recently been, certainly been adopted by this new generation of students. So this issue of decolonization and transformation has been with us since, as I said, since decolonization properly. We also look at transformation when we look at the early Back to Africa and negritude movements, Marcus Garvey, Du Bois, and so on. You see this issue of decolonization is something that occupies the minds of these activists. The timing of the protests, for some it's obvious, but when I came here, and certainly in 2015, before I joined UCT, and I was still living in New York, I wondered the timing. Why 20 years after the constitutional transition and so on? And it sort of made me think about another period in the United States when there were students who occupied campuses. The student movement was quite violent. And I'm thinking here of the 60s and 70s with the Black Power movement, the Black Panthers, the occupation of Cornell, Berkeley, Columbia, and so on. And these movements happened more or less the same time, 20, 30 years after Brown versus Board of Education and the passage of the Civil Rights Act. So I think that the 2 decades, if nothing else, is a reflection of the disappointment and the gaps of the promises of, in the United States, the Civil Rights Movement, and in South Africa, what the Constitution can do and should do. And I don't want to talk about, when I talk about transformation and decolonization, there's certain assumptions that I make. One assumption is that in 21 years, South Africa has experienced a tremendous amount of change and transformation. The problem is that it hasn't been enough. So we're sort of still on the journey to democracy, social justice, and so on. But the idea that things froze 21 years ago is just not correct. And certainly for me, I left South Africa in the mid-1980s, and even though I came back all the time because of my professional commitment and my family here, I have observed every time I come back certain changes. Some of the changes are very good, and some of the changes are not so good, but there's been changes. All right, so just look at, and PowerPoint as well. I know for some people PowerPoint is a distraction and an irritation. I've tried to just use the PowerPoint where I'm using quotations and maybe just a bit of visual effect. So so the PowerPoint is see it as just background, okay? So I apologize to those people who find PowerPoints distracting. So 2015, the first roads must fall. And then 2016, we see decolonize this institution, and then fees must fall. So these are sort of if we look at it chronologically in the last 2 years, the issues largely were around, firstly, the getting rid of the statue of Cecil John Rhodes, so very much a cultural, symbolic moment. Then the question of fees, of course, not just reduced fees. We now find ourselves in a place where there's a question about no fees at all, outsourcing and so on, and then decolonizing. So let's just take a quick look at definitions. So what do we mean by transformation? I looked through quite a few dictionary definitions. I'm writing a chapter actually about this issue for a volume that's coming out of Sydney, Australia, and it's a comparative look at constitutions and social justice, and I'm focusing on the right to education and particularly higher education. So this definition to me seems to encapsulate transformation, a complete change in the appearance or character of something or someone. And then decolonization. Decolonization, a lot of the meanings linked to indigenous movements, indigenous rights to land, sovereignty, indigenous culture, ways of being, consciousness, and so on. And then Frantz Fanon, in his book Wretched of the Earth, speaks about the creation of a new man. So the idea is decolonizing, stripping somebody from all the colonial sentiments and colonial attitudes. When I talk about transformation and decolonization, I'm going to be using the terms interchangeably. From my perspective, decolonization is part of transformation. It doesn't stand on its own. So transformation for me is about changing an institution, holding on to what's valuable and important, but fundamentally changing much of the institution. And I'll talk a little bit about transformation in the UCT context. So where did we come from? In 1994, we know under the old apartheid system, there were 26 universities. 9 were deemed white, and in those days, anybody who was not white required a permit to attend the University of Rhodes, Wits, UCT, Natal, Stellenbosch, and so on. So half English-speaking, half Afrikaans-speaking. Then we had the coloured university set up here in Bellville, the Indian University, the University of Durban-Westville, and then of course the homeland institutions, the University of Zululand, what is now the University of Limpopo, and so on. So this was the apartheid architecture. This is what we inherited 21 years ago, maybe roughly 24 years ago. A deeply segregated university system where resources were allocated grossly disproportionately, where the people who taught at the institutions were definitely differently skilled, where you saw a hierarchy of professional skills, professional education, and so on. And to a large extent, I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say that the old Bantustan universities, the homeland universities, were largely places where retired Afrikaner bureaucrats went to teach. And the idea was not to train a generation or generations of African or black graduates. So that's what we inherited. And so when we think about changes and so on, we're not just talking about transformation at the University of Cape Town. How has Zululand transformed? How has Fort Hare transformed? Has there been an appropriate linking of resources and so on? These are very, very large questions. And then, where are we still in South Africa today? So I sort of was looking at, we've now in a situation in which affluence largely has become, to a limited degree, more multiracial than poverty. Poverty in South Africa still largely has a black face. And so within our society, we have these gross disparities and differences of experiences and so on. And this also bleeds over into the education system, and as we've observed, particularly into universities, and particularly a fine institution like the University of Cape Town. So let me just take a step back and talk about drivers of transformation. What are the things that's pushing universities in South Africa and elsewhere to change? Because it's not just the protests. There's been a tsunami of change, for example, in the United States in the legal profession. And that change has forced law schools and universities to think about a range of things. So I've listed the drivers of change in no particular order, but let me just say technology and globalization has had an impact on the legal profession globally. South African, I spoke to a partner at a law firm the other day, and to some extent South African, particularly the large firms, have not yet been exposed in the same way to the American law firms or the British law firms, where you have technology really, really impacting the business model. So for example, in the States now with LegalZoom.com, Rocket Lawyer, and so on, the business model has been affected. So technology and globalization, and the market for legal services has also changed. Why would you go to a lawyer and pay $500 an hour when you can click onto LegalZoom and get a form, a will or any kind of form, and maybe have very, very minimal contact with a lawyer? But I'm really not interested so much in those. We can just take it as a given that these changes have really impacted higher education and particularly law faculties. I want to talk about the Constitution, the student protests, and there's at the moment a review, a national review taking place of the law degree across all universities. You may or may not have heard about this review, but I do think that it has the potential to be a strong, and in fact it will be a driver for change in law faculties. So the Constitution, we know the Constitution, it's wonderful. The Constitution promises many things. There's an expansive Bill of Rights that promises both civil and political rights, as well as social, economic, and cultural rights. Our Constitution is seen as the best liberal constitution of the 20th century. I used to teach international human rights law in New York, and my course was basically a course on the South African Constitutional Court's judgments. Because from the very first judgment, the Constitution, the judges did not just embrace South African law, but also international law. So the Constitutional Court is one of the most cited, if you don't know that, one of the most cited courts in the world, particularly in the liberal democracies of the North. And as you know, Nelson Mandela was the world's president, all the wonderful things. So our Constitution, and that's the preamble to the Constitution. Most importantly, it doesn't just look back and talk about the divisions of the past, but also there's a commitment to improve the quality of life of all citizens and free the potential of each person. So that's where you see the possibilities and the idea that education can make a difference, and Nelson Mandela constantly spoke about education and the capacity of education to change people's lives. And then we have the Equality Clause, which is also comprehensive, a huge number of grounds protecting discrimination, again, very expansive, very different from, for example, the American Constitution, or even the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. This is a broad set of protections for almost everybody. And then when you throw in dignity and so on, you can really see that everybody is protected. I'm not going to spend a lot of time going, looking at the Constitution. Maybe we would have some time during question and answer, but you all know that our Constitution is really a document that we can be proud of and delighted with. I like this picture, children sort of joyful around a day when they are told about the Constitution and Bill of Rights. So what does the Constitution say about education and the right to education? It says a lot about social and economic rights. Right of access to housing, right of access to health, etc. I've sort of reduced to focus on what universities, the role of universities. Section 29 talks about everybody having the right to a basic education, including adult basic education, and to further education, which the state, through reasonable measures, must make progressively available. So essentially, this is about the state balancing its resources and how it will allocate its resources. And this really is about what the struggle is about in South Africa right now. If you look at the last decade of service delivery protests, for example, in places throughout South Africa, it is about this capacity of the state to make choices and improve the lives of people. So let's just quickly look at the demands of students. I've summarized them. They many, many demands, and because of the way that different universities are situated, there are some demands which are quite localized, and then we see specifically 3 sets of demands that the students have made. Economic demands, transformation, decolonization, and the localized demands are sort of, people who have been suspended, how they are treated. Whether we get to what we will do with, what the university will do with those who have been arrested and now in the criminal justice system, and so on. But I'm just going to focus on the question of transformation and decolonization. And also the economic demands. So we've seen the first driver of change, the Constitution, of the student protests, the second driver of change. So let's look at these 3. As I said, I won't focus on the localized demands. But the first are a set of economic demands, and they really are about access to higher education. The idea that there should be a larger pool of people who have access to higher education. Now, we can have a conversation about whether everybody should go to university or majority of the population and so on. But I think the demand was about access. And because historically, university wasn't available to a large part of the population, and particularly a university like the University of Cape Town, I think this demand is quite poignant. Then the second demand is no fee increases, which moved to free university education. And at places like the University of Cape Town, there was the call for the elimination of outsourcing. So about 6 months ago, all workers at UCT were insourced with all kinds of economic consequences, but that is certain economic consequences for those who were insourced, good one for them, and for the university, clearly, I think there were questions around resources and so on, but again, that's a larger conversation. So the economic demands of the students were very clear. I think where insourcing has happened, last year there was not a fee increase, this year there has been, but what has happened is that students whose parents earn below 600,000, for the most part, are getting quite a bit of financial aid, or else their tuition has been waived. Free education is free higher education is very controversial. I myself don't believe that there should be free education for all. People who can pay should pay. There should be free education for poor students, for the so-called missing middle. There should be financial assistance and so on, but there should be a way for people who are able to enter the middle class and who start earning a decent salary to be able to pay back. So those are loans, but that's a very, very large conversation. But that's where we're at right now, free education. So the economic demands are, to a large extent, the economic demands really can only be met through a partnership with government, the private sector, maybe the non-governmental sector and universities. So I want to talk a little bit about this notion of transformation and decolonization. What is the essence of this? What is the core? Why are the students so mad at the universities, and what would they like to see? So again, I've extracted them and just given sort of the major points. So the first is the racial demographics of academic staff. UCT and many of the historically white universities, except maybe University of KwaZulu-Natal, which used to be University of Natal, to a lesser extent BITS. But most formerly white universities, the student population has largely changed at UCT. The majority of students now are black. The majority of academic staff, UCT in the law faculty as well, is still white. So there's sort of almost the exact number, the percentage of students, it's sort of the flip side. So I would say that something like 2/3 of students are black, and then 2/3 of academic staff is white. So those are the racial statistics. And so the students have called for more demographic representation to reflect South African demographics. The second is a more interesting issue, and this is about the hierarchies in the classroom. And this is a movement that's been around for quite a few decades, not just in South Africa, but elsewhere as well. And this is idea about how you teach and how students learn. So there's the saying that teachers now, university teachers, this was what I was certainly familiar with in my years of teaching there. Teachers should move from being sages on stages to guides on the side. And the idea is it's got to be more democratic, it's got to be more engaged, we have to take account of students' different learning styles, etc., etc. I think it's largely a reflection of the generation of people who tweet, whom social media is very, very important, maybe whose attention span is different from previous generations and so on. So hierarchy, but this idea that you don't have the ultimate authority, that students can learn from each other, etc. I myself believe that an engaged classroom, where the students actually engage and learn from each other, as well as learn from the expert, is a very healthy learning environment. But that was not South African legal education. I went to the University of Natal in Durban in the late 70s, early 80s. And even though it was a wonderful place and so on, it was very, very hierarchical, where rote learning was rewarded and so on. And though things have changed quite a bit, they haven't changed in the way that I think is healthy for this generation of students and the way we could make the classroom a little bit more engaged and interesting. But that's another conversation, because if there's some people who are doing that, and in different faculties there have been different changes. I'm focusing only on the law faculty. And then the third issue that the students have spoken about is the question of curricular reform. What are we teaching? How are we teaching? Why do we prioritize this set of laws over that? So for example, it has changed now at UCT, but the idea was, why teach Roman law and not African customary law? You know, we're an African country and so on. So a range of issues around curricular reform, and then also teaching methods. What kind of methodologies are we using to really empower students? So if we stand in front of a room and just stand and lecture, and the students furiously take down notes, and then for an exam they just regurgitate what they've been given. It's a very passive kind of learning. Now that doesn't happen. That has changed somewhat, but there's still parts of the old passive learning styles, the rote learning that's so much part of legal education. Then the other issue that students talk about is the culture of teaching and learning, and it's sort of linked to this idea of the engaged classroom and how we interact with them and so on. And then the fifth issue that the protesters have highlighted is the question of engaged and relevant research. Now this is a difficult one because an excellent institution has the resources and the capacity to engage in a range of things, and who determines what's esoteric and what's irrelevant? And I think that this is a very, very difficult question because research is not just, its application and its value aren't always apparent right from the beginning. And decades later, maybe somebody who sat in some room looking at the mating habits of the fruit fly may come up with something that will help us go, sort of build a large aircraft or something like that. So the linkages, I think, are difficult to see, but that's an issue. And then decolonized African epistemologies. In other words, are we using African resources, African research, African literature, and so on? Now, law is particularly difficult because law is localized. And, it's all well for our students to learn the law of persons in Kenya or Tanzania, but if they don't practice there, it doesn't make much sense. So I think those are some of the issues, but this was certainly raised by the students. I'm not going to go through much, but as I said, the Council of Higher Education is currently conducting a review of all law schools to look at the LL.B. and to look what we are teaching, how we are teaching, etc. So I've just highlighted some questions that the surveys have asked. Each law faculty must write a self-assessment report, self-evaluation report, and answer a series of questions. And these are some of the questions that we've been asked about how our degree imparts to our graduates comprehensive and sound knowledge of the South African law, values, etc., etc. So these are just, I'm just mentioning, I've just highlighted some questions. It's a range of questions. It's a big document with detailed information, with data, graphs, and so on. And then the staff. The survey also looks at staff, who we employ, the background of staff, diversity of expertise, ideas, etc., etc. So it goes beyond the demographic change, but also diversity in a range of ways. And this is an issue. Diversity of ideas has plagued universities in the UK, in the USA, and so on, Australia, where there's the argument, and I certainly think this argument holds in law school, where sort of a particular ideology holds more sway than others. So they've actually done research, this is factual, that law professors in the 200 law schools in the United States mostly are liberal, are Democrat voters, Democratic Party voters. So that's a bias that's been shown. Of course it raises all kinds of questions. But I'm sure that in other faculties, scientists here will probably be the other side, maybe the science faculties or engineering. There should be diversity. All right, so obstacles to transformation. What are some of the obstacles to transformation? So I've sort of raised these: constitution, student protests, the LL.B. review, and so on. But of course, people say we should transform, and then we have the conversation, and think about ways of doing it, we bring in experts, we look at the literature, and so on. The first is that we now know that there are basic education deficits that many students at UCT and elsewhere are burdened with. And universities can only do so much. By the time somebody comes to university, if they've been through a very, very poor schooling system, and where much of what they need to do to succeed at universities, even with all our changes, creates real problems. So we now know that this is the dirty secret of South Africa, that our basic education system has let hundreds of thousands, millions of students, particularly black students, down, I'd argue. Then there's the fragile culture of human rights, what I call that, and that is a sort of polarizing in debate and discourse. That it's very, very hard for people who do not agree on fundamental points to engage in a dialogue, to be able to either reach some kind of agreement or to disagree in a way that's healthy. So, apartheid was such a violation of human rights. I mean, you know, apartheid was deemed a crime against humanity in 1977. So, and the system did not encourage, there was not a culture of human rights. So this idea that we have this cutoff date in 1994, we all go to the polls, and all the bad habits that we've learned suddenly disappear, that's just utopian. So I think there is a very fragile culture of human rights. It's evidenced in the crimes in our country, the violence against women, our racism, our sexism. There's a range of ways in which there is this fragile. It doesn't mean that we're the worst or anything. Look who the United States just voted. I mean, everywhere this is a problem. Voted for president, sorry. And then the shared consensus about the goals of education. I think that there has been a very interesting dialogue since 1994 happening with the leaders of higher education, with vice chancellors, with principals, with deans and so on, about the goals of education. And I think that it's a work in progress, but if we could have some shared idea that sort of gels with the values of the Constitution, because people with a university degree have all kinds of aspirations. And what we teach and how we teach and the kinds of skills that students need is very often not easy to ascertain. Like I often ask, we have a conversation, what kind of lawyers do we want in South Africa in 2017 compared to lawyers from 1974? Maybe the skills are the same, I doubt it. But what exactly, we can have sort of broad consensus, very smart and all of that, but really what kind of skills? And then there's skills like collaboration and empathy, what is called soft skills. Those are the kinds of skills that 21st century professionals need in a range of ways. So this is just the idea that there's not a shared consensus. And then the tension between excellence and elitism. So UCT is an excellent institution. It's the best university on the continent. Its rankings, there's so many indicators which that the University of Cape Town is excellent. Summer program, it's alumni and so on. Does it have to be elitist? And what does it mean when we say it's an elite institution? It's difficult because we're all, we are elite in different ways. But can we be excellent and without being elitist, because the elitism goes to exclusion. And one of the things that I know from the UCT law faculty, when I came in last year, the students were surveyed. And most of the law students were very, very pleased with their education. And they got great jobs and so on. But almost to the person, the black students who identified as black, said they felt like they didn't belong. They were excluded. So I don't know what the answer is. We can do many things, but this question of excellence and elitism is a difficult one to interrogate. And then the structure and culture of higher education, again, there's clearly a pecking order. There's a pecking order everywhere in the world. Do we keep the pecking order? What do we do about access, etc., etc.? And then the culture in which, again, it goes to the earlier point that I raised about in the classroom. It may be that American higher education is so expensive and students see themselves as consumers. But as a teacher, I taught there for 22 years, and I would know my students, I would invite them to my house, I would know their names when they became lawyers. We engaged with our students in ways that some people do here, but it's not part of the culture. And I think it certainly has to do with maybe the large classrooms we have. I have no idea. But this is not something that I think, this is something that we need to pay attention to. Because it really, the capacity to stay engaged and be intimately involved with the professional development of your students, for me, has always been a joy. I met, as the students have graduated, I have this open door policy, and I've met some final year students who want a character reference from me. And when I ask them, who's your mentor? So some of them have never had no mentor. Nobody in the law faculty that they can go to and say, you know, somebody who knows them can vouch for their character in a way that some students can. And I think that makes a difference as well, and it's particularly important with the demographics that we have. But again, it's a difficult issue. So, what does a transformed law faculty look like? You know, I have a dream and so on. The commitment to excellence, equity, and diversity, engaged research and scholarship, excellent and innovative teaching pedagogy. The idea, I'm such a big believer in this idea of mentoring and advising, because my own life, my mother had spent 6 months in high school, none of my sisters, my brother graduated from high school, and the mentoring that I received allowed me to have the kind of life that I could not imagine. So I'm a very, very fervent, I'm a fundamentalist about mentoring and advising. And then individualized and tailored career pathways. Many people leave the law after a few years, particularly women, but the statistics, certainly from my experience in the States, and I think it's the same here, that people go into law and they don't have a clear idea of what it is they would like to do, and yet lawyers can do so many different great things, that it would be helpful for them to think creatively about their career pathways and know that there's just not one way of doing law, being a lawyer, etc. And particularly the young people come to university and they're enthusiastic and they want to change the world and they're advocates and so on. And then after a year something happens and they have to make sure that they get the exams and go for the interviews, etc. I think it would be helpful, it would be great to harness the passion of students when they come, if they want whatever it is they want to do. And I'm not making a judgment here about any area of the law, but I do know that there are lots of exciting career pathways for lawyers. And then I'm going to end here with a set of twins who graduated this year. So that's me at their graduation lunch. Thank you. Questions or comments?
Okay, thank you. Guys, I'm bringing out from the development department, so I'm just going to hand the Q&A here for Penny. We're not going to allow a lot, otherwise we will be here the whole night. So, Penny.
Yes.
Okay.
Question papers in other faculties like law, and I do think that some of those questions, our second language students are set up for failure because it's very, very difficult. I think a lot of us agree that English is a little richer language, and words like notwithstanding, although, all those nasty little mediations of meaning put the students off completely if English is not their home language.
I'm going to take 3 questions.
Okay. 3 here. Okay, another one. Over there. Yes, sir.
always regarded the university as embodying me as part of its history, and part of its heritage, part of its history. And I'm very proud of the institute. But on a personal thing, something that irks me is that the photograph of my final year class, which has been on display since 1964, together with all the other photographs of the final year classes, have been removed from level 5. They've been gone for about 5 years, for about a year. Seemingly in pursuit of some kind of decolonisation idea. If that is so, the kind of difficulty I have is that I would then have been expunged, taken away from, rather removed from the history of the university, brushed out, as it were, which makes me think that if the university is ashamed of me, then what? Should I continue as a donor?
Okay. All right, so we've got 3 questions. I know the other people, but why not?
What is the reason for that? And should that entitle me to suspend my donations until the photographs
Okay. So I'm going to look at 3 questions and we'll take another 3. Okay. So I'll start with the question, the language and assessment, and how anybody who doesn't speak English as a first language is severely disadvantaged. And there's a lot of research being done around that. I totally agree with you, and particularly multiple choice questions. Multiple choice questions test a particular kind of intelligence, never mind language issues. And so I think that that is something that we are paying attention to. And not just with multiple choice questions, but the whole issue about assessment and evaluation. And it's sort of common sense that when you teach something, you have to really know, be clear about how you're going to evaluate and assess, because the content is linked to the assessment. There's a lot of work going into that, but I do agree with you that, the question about somebody who's formed English is not a first language struggles tremendously. And that is part of the work we're doing around transformation here in the faculty. Your question about whether free education is possible right now, from my limited knowledge on the economic matter, so that I'm not burdened by too much knowledge on economics and this question, that I think we can't afford to. I think that there are other more pressing issues, basic education, healthcare, children, a range. I think that free education should be available to those who can't afford to, but if we offered free university education for everybody, I think there would be severe consequences. Maybe the government does have the money. That's fine. They ought to prioritize it. And I don't think that this is a first priority for those who can afford. I'm not saying it's not a first priority for people generally. So I don't have the answer. Maybe the economists here know the answer. But my own sense is that there are so many other priorities before university education that I think it's probably not possible. Then the photos of the final year class. Yes, that predates me. But I actually did, and I'm not trying to be a coward here. I have raised this because I came into the law faculty and there was no art. So it's hard to come into a building without photos and art. And there's a university committee that was set up to look at this because this was an issue that students had raised. And then also I think some paintings were removed last year because there was an issue with paintings were removed from the residences and burnt. Now I have thought about this question about earlier classes. To me, there's a basic fact that if you look at the classes from 1900 to 1990, at overwhelmingly white universities. The people in the photos are going to be white, with maybe a few black people. What you do with that, my personal feeling is you put it up there and you have, you know, explanations. I have this idea that what I like to do is put the oldest class and the newest class together and have some way of sort of having it as a dialogue spread across the wall on the 5th floor. Now, I don't have the authority as the dean to determine that, because those above me on the food chain already have said that there's a committee and we need to do that. And I think the committee is seriously addressing this. And I would request to why you should give, continue to give, because firstly, I don't think they're ashamed of you. So the characterization I would not agree with. And I do think that withdrawing resources from UCT at this point, I think is counterproductive. We need more support now. Certainly we haven't always done things in a way that's perfect or that's right and that you may disagree with. But I think that the university is max and the university executive is really trying to come to terms with this kind of tumult that's here now, but we've had tumultuous experiences. When I was a student in Durban, we protested all the time and so on. So I hear what you say, I hear frustration, but it's not the same. But sometimes those who belong, we have teenage children particularly, they behave accordingly, but we still need to support them. Now, I'm not saying this is the same. When you think about this institution that's really struggling with very, very difficult, challenging questions. And in fact, is being forced to struggle with these questions because I think that government hasn't picked up the battle. So, yes, all I can say is we're certainly not ashamed of you, very proud of you. When I heard judge, I thought, oh dear, I hope I didn't say anything that was... all us lawyers are scared of judges. Yes. I understand, but again, as I said, when you think about what's at stake for people and why some people maybe may act the way they do. So I don't want to make a generalist, we don't have the time to go into the student protests and what happened this day and the violence here and so on and the silencing and all of that. But for many people, young people who are at UCT and at other universities, the degree stands between them and poverty. The desperation, it's clear they don't get a degree. It's unemployment rate for young people is abysmal. So that level of desperation, I'm not excusing it, but I think we need to engage because the stakes are so high. And I do think that South Africa has come from where it has been to now, to some extent, we're a model for the world. We always think we're the worst. This country, what it has achieved, everybody, remember when everybody said there was going to be a bloodbath in 1990, and people are going to be, all whites are going to be killed and thrown into the sea, all of that. South Africa is a leader in so many different ways, and we have these fine institutions. But for us, the trick is to really ensure that we produce graduates who will go out and do the necessary work. And look at we know some graduates, there's some people I know, certainly in the States, who are sort of titans of Wall Street, who are members of the Black Panthers, who are, people eventually grow up. And there's less of them than students who are serious about their studies. So this is my inartful way of saying, don't give up on UCT. We really are trying very hard, even if we don't do it, or we always don't do it right.
Okay, right at the back there, that gentleman, and then that gentleman over there, and then over here.
Just a practical point of semantics. Law is inclined to use words in a very precise meaning. If you play around on Facebook, you will find at least 3 or 4 meanings of decolonization, and they mean totally different things to the people who are concerned. To some it means you've got to do away with pickle-rugby and anything else, and to others it means everybody with white skin must be kicked out, and so on and so on. And I think the problem in these debates is we put a precise meaning on something, and it's not all that precise.
Other questions? Yes.
It seems to me that this project of transformation could be a really exciting, wonderful project. Not something that you can be flippant about, but a really profound change that seems possible here at an institution like this, that would make our university profoundly relevant to the South African situation and free of all the rubbish baggage of the colonial past. And I think that that's a great, exciting thing to be involved with. I don't think you've stressed that enough in your transformed law. And I also feel that you didn't even mention Africa, although you obviously suggested it earlier in your talk, but you didn't mention Africa in your transformed law story. How does the law faculty here be deeply grounded in South Africa so that students who come here who want to do law feel that you're talking around a language that comes from their life experience and not a life experience that comes from Europe?
Okay.
Yes, I want to take you to the talk. My question is, what is the university's approach to when I hear people speaking of decolonizing scientific subjects, medicine, engineering? It's difficult to understand. I realize, I'm part of the medical I realize that the content can be relevant, it is relevant to our country. But the approach, this subject, how do you approach scientific subjects in a decolonization? I just don't understand what is the university's approach to that, not the students.
Yes. Okay. All right. So let me first start with the first question, one about the precise nature of the word decolonization. As I said when I started, that I've essentially taken one or two definitions, but the notion of transformation and decolonization in many ways means different things to different people, as you point out. But for us to really engage with it, we've really got to take on board these different meanings and see what we can do about the project. So I agree with you. We don't need to have a precise meaning of decolonization to do the kinds of things that we need to do to do the exciting things that the third questionnaire person has raised. So let me go to question 3. You're correct, transformation is exciting, and I thought I would sort of show this excitement by some of what I've said. Of course, I couldn't cover all of it, but this is the reason why I came back to live in South Africa, because of the possibilities of transformation. I didn't see the point in coming back and just same old, same old. So I agree with you, it is incredibly exciting. It's also challenging. I don't think that you can just throw out everything. You know, and for example, we have one of the protesters that I've got to know, who was part of Shackle, as it was called, has gone to go and sing opera in Vienna. He's a serious opera singer. So I think you can't, there's certain things, our colonial past means that there's been a mesh, so you cannot just throw out everything European in the document. I don't know if you meant that, but I didn't mean to suggest that this is a burden. I think it's very, very exciting. And maybe for the next, I'm just kidding. I was going to say for the next thing, I will really try to be more excited, but I agree with you. With respect to deeply grounded in Africa, as I said, I did mention Africa in my talk, and I spoke about the limitations of African law in a context in which law is so localized. And I gave the example, but of course, if we think about African customary law as being part of South African law, we need to embrace our indigeneity and the fact that we are in South Africa and in Africa. But I also want to tell you about some limitations with respect to African research and so on. I went to my first African Law Deans meeting in Zambia in April. And from what I knew, because when I lived in the States, I've been to a couple, gone to Makerere, Nairobi, and so on. Many of Africa's great universities are shadows of their former selves. They're not doing the kind of research that we are doing at UCT because of resources, because something like 90% of African intellectuals don't even live on the continent. A lot of the work is being done in the global north. So I hear what you say and so on, but we have to be engaged with it in an authentic and credible way with integrity, but recognize as well that what we've inherited and what we're trying to do, there's a lot that we can embrace, but of course there's a lot we can jettison. So I hope I answered your question. I think it's an exciting challenge. I think we don't know yet in fact, we never get to the stage of transformation. It's a work in progress that takes centuries. I mean, the first university was opened when was it, in 1170 or something like that? Oh, look how universities are still struggling and transforming and so on. So I think the whole business of knowledge production is about transformation. And I agree with you. But I think we can't just embrace Africanness as a sort of, we have to be very, very clear. And for me, this is my interest. I do want to work very, very much with African law schools and really encourage our students to embrace internships and work and research and so on. But my concern is that the great universities, Makerere University, for example, I don't want UCT 20 or 30 years down the road to be Makerere University because people have left, the resources, the buildings, etc., etc. The other thing is that we offer internships and exchange programs. And many, many students from the rest of Africa come to UCT. Our graduate program is almost entirely African students. But South African students if they get an internship, they'll go to London, or Berlin, or New York. To get them to go to Nairobi or Kampala is very difficult. So these are some of the real issues that we need to grapple with. The fact as well is that when I go to the African Law Deans meeting, I can talk about all the exciting research that the faculty is engaged in here, and many of the lecturers at many of the law schools have to have a second job because they barely get paid and they have to have practices and so on. So I hear what you say, but I think that I absolutely agree with you. It's very, very exciting and it's not just a burden. And then the third, about decolonizing scientific subjects. Again, this is a very complicated issue. Of course, nobody thinks, that we should think about throwing out penicillin and then replacing it with beetroot. I mean, but I do think that there was a YouTube about a student who had spoken about throwing out science, and I think the social media was very cruel with the student, because I think, we've got people say things in the heat of the moment, it's a feature of youth and naivety and so on. I think science, and certainly medicine, there is the capacity to decolonize and transform. What shape it will take, I can't tell you, I'm not a doctor, but I do know that the Faculty of Health Sciences has been engaged in a range of really, really exciting projects and work and so on that tries to link the real-life experiences of people, the patients, the African patients, that has to do with language, with culture, with sort of traditional medicine. Again, not exchanging one for the other. So it's a dialectical relationship, very, very exciting, with not just one answer, but of course we can't throw out scientific research that has proven to improve our lives, to change our lives. But we also can't ignore where we practice science, the impact, where is science? What is the experience of students who come to the science faculty? We don't want their experience to overwhelm their school, but it is a recognition of their differences, etc., etc. As I said, I don't have the answer, but I'm certainly not calling, as I said, for exchanging penicillin for beetroot.
Okay, unfortunately, we need to call it quits there, even for you who are.
Okay. A remark, okay.
What I think about only white faces.
I think find my answer there. Okay.
Not yet.
Those who couldn't afford got bursaries or loans and repaid them. Why can people not get bursaries or take loans?
I think that's very important debate completely. I think it will be unfair to just do it on all because that's a situation. Maybe what we should do is one of our alumni leadership sessions, maybe on that, so people understand what happens with fees, where the fees come from, what our fee sources are. You know, we've got different income streams, the government, research, fees, all that side. So it's a heck of a lot more complex than what it was then. Also, our numbers are quite fruitful since 1944. The university was never designed for 26,000 students. So it's a very difficult one. And I think maybe on another occasion, something that we can dedicate to a speaker from that department.
Except I can say, there's just one thing I want to say about law, that I'm trying to raise enough money so that everybody has a bursary or some kind of financial assistance and so on. So when you do think of giving, think about the law factor.
About giving fees, look at those brochures in front of you, the legacy brochure, the English UCD brochure. We're concentrating on law for the next 6 months. So please, she wasn't joking. We are having a law campaign for raising money, especially on the legacy side. I ask you to please have a good way. And then just as a thank you very much. Just want to say thank you for sharing us